To e-bike or not to e-bike?
In our parks and open spaces and on urban trails, both paved and unpaved.
Next on Loving the Springs, the podcast where we celebrate the best and elevate the rest.
You're listening to Studio 809 Podcasts. This is what community sounds like.
Hi, I'm Dave Gardner.
And I'm Al Brody.
We're coming to you from the Studio 809 Community Podcast Studio at the lovely The Next Us, which is a professional cooperative environment for small businesses in downtown Colorado Springs. We're recording this episode on November 15th, 2024, and just a quick note, we are still looking for a third co-host. We don't want it to just be two cranky old guys talking. We're looking for a younger member of the team.
That rules us out.
It does, sadly. There's no quota, but I'm kind of hoping that it's not another male, you know. We do have a diversity, equity, and inclusion policy here at Loving the Springs.
Good for you.
Yeah.
I don't ask, don't tell, Dave.
If you are interested in joining us as a co-host or trying it out, send us an email, lovingthespringspodcast@gmail.com.
In this episode, we're focusing on e-bikes policy on Colorado Springs urban and open space trails, again, both paved and unpaved. It becomes important.
Yeah, this is a perfect topic for Al because Al knows a thing or two about bicycles, that's for sure. But it's also a perfect topic for our guest today. I invited into the studio to update us and to offer some opinions, Kent and Ruth Obee. Now, I know, Ruth Obee, it's easy to tell people that you're an award-winning poet and author. I don't know how many books of your work are out there. How many?
At this stage, there are at least 6 and one in the works.
Great to hear about that. You two are model citizens because you pay attention and you speak up when you see something that you think needs changing. You don't just speak up about everything, but you pick your battles. But you also have pretty interesting long-term background. So I want to invite you just real quickly to let listeners who don't already know about you know a little bit about what you did in your professional lives and how you came to Colorado Springs, et cetera.
Okay, well, first of all, I was born in Colorado Springs.
I'd forgotten that.
Over 80 years ago. My grandfather was the superintendent of Cheyenne Mountain High. Held that position, I think, for 36 years. And during the course of that, my father, who was originally born in Michigan, came out to work in Rocky Mountain National Park and then came down to teach in Cheyenne Mountain School. And lo and behold, he married the superintendent's daughter. And ergo me. But in any event, then later the family moved to Idaho. It's actually where I met Ruth. Then, in part to get out of Idaho, I ended up having a career in the Foreign Service, which is essentially the diplomatic corps of the United States.
Yeah.
Ruth and I got married just as this was all beginning. And over the next 30 years, we served in India, Nepal, Pakistan, Tanzania, South Africa, and, of course, Washington, D.C. But upon my retirement, we made very much a joint decision that we would move back to Colorado. This was in the late 1990s. And about the first thing that really caught our attention after we moved back was the attempt to pass the TOPS open space ordinance. And we got here just in time for it to fail on the first try.
Oh.
And then, fortunately, in April of 97, it succeeded. And then the first really critical target property was the Myron Stratton property, which is now the Stratton Open Space, because it was already under option for development. Plat had been done, and we got involved in that campaign, and to a certain extent, that became sort of our chosen retirement cause. I was on the TOPS working committee when we bought Red Rock Canyon. Later went on to the Parks Board. We got Section 16, Manitou 16, and we've just stayed involved one way or another. Ruth, as she'll probably tell you, has written several books about open space efforts and open space failures. But anyway, that's, I think, why we're sitting here with you today.
Darn, just when you thought you were going to kick back and read a good book and go for some hikes, you two have been pretty busy.
Well, we've done some of the kicking back and
Good.
the skiing and the hiking and things like that.
All right, Ruth, your turn.
Well, I'm a Western American woman, and I grew up in Idaho. Kent and I both of us were involved in international affairs. I've been an English teacher. I am a writer, a published writer. Over the years living abroad, we met many interesting people, including academics, authors, thinkers, kings, dictators, and so forth. We have lived in countries that are everything from socialist to monarchy to military dictatorship. And I believe deeply in the democratic process, and that really enhanced my appreciation of what we have, which is so precious here, freedom of speech. I came back and I edited a publication that was put out by the Foreign Service Association in Washington, D.C., Foreign Service Spouses. And then I was awarded a kind of a scholarship to go to George Washington University and study layout and editing. So these are always been my interest. But the thing is that as a foreign service spouse, there was no chance in a foreign country to take part in advocating for something. And so when we came back to Colorado Springs, here was a chance to actually do something more than just to tell America's story to the world, but actually be involved in that story, to take a role, to have a role. I mean, this is a part, of what makes us, I think, a great country, is community-level involvement.
Well, that's a good summary of just a pinch of what you guys have done. I believe, and I speak for the whole community here at this moment, that we owe a huge debt of gratitude for the things that you have done for this community at the time that you actually did them. Because once these TOPS properties were either purchased or not, they're gone. And this community, because of you and people like you at the time that you did it, have conserved. I always find that interesting. It's a liberal thing to conserve things. Conserved what would be lost in this community. And the places that I choose to dwell most of the time in my life, biking, hiking, just sitting and looking at the amazing surroundings we have, I go to these places. And I think, as I see other developments, and I know you're witnessing them too, places that I rode that had these canyons, these beautiful, deep, steep canyons, have now been flattened and replaced with tons of houses. I realize we're a city and we have to infill and we have to do those things, but striking the optimal balance is such a key. And to think that you played such a significant part in what we have and what we enjoy today, I owe you a debt of gratitude, and thank you.
That's good stuff to celebrate. Yeah, so we're talking about e-bikes policy now. Why? Who wants to tee this up?
I'd like to start. So let me put it in perspective. There are 3 reasons, I think, that people get frustrated with equipment. And I'll call it that because it's not just e-bikes at this point. It's these personal mobility devices. And in addition to that, there's RC off-road vehicles that are becoming a thing on our trails. I wouldn't bring it up if it wasn't a use for the trail.
What does RC mean? Radio
controlled. So if you haven't seen this, these are electric or gas. Some of them are gas, and they're probably 1 foot to 3 feet long. If they get much bigger than that, you can ride them and they become something else. So you have people that want these cars to go over bumps in the dirt. So they're using the trails and the bike parks, the off-road bike parks, for their RC cars.
I had no idea.
So that's the thing. And it's a valid use of the trail. You now have one wheels. You have electric skateboards. You have electric one-wheel, a unicycle, different than a one-wheel skateboard. And this year, for the first time, I've seen an electric snowboard. So if you think that, well, when it snows, people won't be using the trails, that's over, okay?
Wow.
They're still perfecting it, but it's kind of over. So you'll have electric rollerblades, both on-road and off-road. They exist. Electric skateboards. You have electric snowboard. All these things have become things that were never things, but they're now, and they're going to continue. I think we're in a renaissance of different ways to move our bodies about. So you have some frustrations with electric bikes, which is a tip. And I think it could be safety. But we know from data all over the country, including here, that safety is not the issue. It's not people dying. It's not like intersections. So safety isn't a thing. It may be a perception, but the data doesn't say they're unsafe. Bicycles or electric bicycles. The other thing could be the environment. Are electric bikes destroying the environment? And the answer to that is no more than regular bikes. And if you think about the thing that allows bicycles to go quickly, fast, it's suspension on off-road trails. It's not the electric. I can go faster down a hill on a bike with no electric. If it has suspension, it's not even close. And a downhill bicycle with suspension can be faster than a motorcycle going downhill. So it's not about speed per se. So it comes down to user interface in many ways. It's, can a hiker, can an equestrian get along with the bicyclist, be it electric or non-electric? And all these other devices, because they all bring their own issues. I believe there's two sections to the people willing to engage in this fight. There's a lot of people in the middle that don't really care. They just want to do what they do and don't really care about the policy. On one end of the policy, you have downhill, off-road cyclists, mountain bikers who want and are building trails like the Black Sheep. Black Sheep is a trail in Pulpit Rock open space. If you haven't tried it, it says no hikers. They don't want anybody else on it. It is a downhill, off-road mountain bike trail, which I have ridden it on my electric bike, but part of riding it is literally carrying my bike down some of the obstacles. So we have built a trail that is for 2%, 10% maybe, of the people who ride mountain bikes. And we have that. And we have others. And that's the people who don't like electric mountain bikes because they're too damn slow on the downhill trails. They get in the way of people, and they're too damn slow up a trail.
Wow.
So if you think speed is the issue, it is an issue, but it's not the way you think it is. On the other end, we have the OG, and I will call you guys the original guard. The OG.
Thank goodness it's not old.
It's not. It's the old guard. It's original gangster, whatever you want to call it. It's a good thing. You are the OG, and I respect that. And the OG in me says we are doing too much damage to the open spaces. And we're building. Okay, and we'll talk. I'm just trying to lay it out. Who's fighting who for what? So we want to preserve what we have. And if you've experienced some of the new trails, they're wiping out the open part of open space. There's too many trails. And we're closing some of the trails, and that's a good thing. But all the things that bring you to preserving a space, the rock features, the rock outcroppings, the things that you see and you go, wow, that's really different. That's where these trails are being built, right up against them and sometimes right over them. It's fun on a bike. I have to admit that. We've turned our beautiful open spaces with fragile sandstone and decomposing granite into a pile of sand. And it's happening. If you want to look at something, take a look at Palmer Park. If you remember Palmer Park in the 90s, and I do, I came to Colorado Springs in the early 90s and rode it on a new, rigid, no suspension mountain bike. And it was challenging, but the bike was light, so it was fun. Now, if you go in there, the wildest outcroppings of rocks have people riding all over them, and we're breaking them up. We're destroying them. So there's two ends of the people who are frustrated. But realize, and this is why I said all this, it's not safety. It's not the environment per se. It's the frustration of users together and how we use it that may affect the other two things.
And safe to say, because there's so many users and because of these conflicting approaches, the city's decided belatedly we need to have some rules. You know, the more people you have, the more rules you have to have. So here we are, the city's developing a policy, and I guess, I don't know whether we even need to mention that they tried a policy, right, a couple of years ago, and it wasn't totally well thought out, and it was a flop.
Well, we have guests, and I want them to speak,
Yeah.
but one of the options in management of anything is do nothing. And we have chosen that option for a while. We've chosen to do nothing. So now it's to the point where, second time around, and I think you've been involved in both of these iterations. It may be hard to tell the difference between the first one and the second one, but I believe we agree this is the second one, to come up with a policy for how to do this, especially on TOPS purchased properties. So with that, let's hear it.
Well, yes. Let me just start with TOPS purchased properties. If you will, I think the hidden 800-pound gorilla in this particular room, in this particular discussion, is the TOPS ordinance itself. And, you know, whether you want more e-bikes or e-devices, and I've seen everything that you talked about on the Stratton open space, the TOPS ordinance itself says these properties purchased by TOPS, whether they're trails or open spaces with trails on them, are for what they call passive recreation, and specifically there is a prohibition of any motorized use. Mm-hmm. And where we got into it, and where I think most of the people who are engaged in, particularly, if you will, the anti-side of the discussion, is that we do think e-bikes are motorized. Now, back in the 1990s, when we were doing the TOPS ordinance, the big thing they were looking at were the dirt bikes, you know, the small motorcycles that are still used up in Captain Jack's and things like that, and also ATVs. And even though they were invented back in the 1890s, e-bikes were not a feature on the scene here yet, but they have now emerged. And, you know, I think would have to criticize, but also sympathize with my friends in the Parks Department. They've been trying to grapple with this. And in the meantime, the illicit motorized use continues on virtually every open space in the city inventory, whether it stops or not. And you're having some of the effects that, yes, you all pointed out, of some pretty significant damage to these properties. But to me, and this is why I've gotten back involved again, is I do think the TOPS ordinance needs to be protected. And for a long time, that was the city's position. And then, you know, to tell the story the way I think it really happened, is the e-bike lobby got to the mayor, our new mayor, Yemi Mobilati, and they convinced him that this was a good thing for development and recreation and tourism and everything else. And his legal staff, and these are people I know and have dealt with over a number of years, came up with a workaround. And the workaround was that we will administratively say that e-bikes are not motorized, and then we will administratively apply that city code change to the TOPS ordinance. And this is where I have real problems with where they're going, because the TOPS ordinance was voter approved, and literally the final paragraph of that ordinance says this ordinance shall only be changed or amended by a vote of the electorate. And that's what the city is trying to duck at this point in time.
I'm going to guess here that there was this conversation where they were talking about making these changes, and somebody said, well, we're going to have to put it to a vote of the people. And somebody said, well, geez, that's going to be damn expensive. And then they turned to the lawyers and said, isn't there some cheaper way we can do this?
Well, that came up yesterday in the Parks Board meeting, and there are several fallacies. First of all, if you put a change to the TOPS ordinance, and this has been done at least 3 times in the past already before the voters, and you put it on a city election, say where you're electing your city council and things like that, there is actually no extra cost to the city. The ballot's printed. Maybe, there may be a small amount of ink for the extra space on the TOPS thing. But the argument that this is going to cost the city a lot of money is fallacious because there's already an election in place. And in fact, the last extension of TOPS was on a November ballot, but they very carefully waited until they were putting everybody's favorite 2C, the pothole tax, on the ballot. And then because the pothole tax was on the ballot, you could add the TOPS tax at no extra cost.
But even if it was costly, it still seems like the right thing to do is to require a vote of the people.
That's what I would say. And as I say, in the past, they've always done it. They haven't always wanted to. But when we, speak of one of Al's favorite places, when we bought Red Rock Canyon, this was the first extension of the tax, and we had to extend it because the canyon was sufficiently expensive that it would have basically wiped out the rest of the TOPS budget for the duration of the program. But part of our deal with then Mayor Lionel Rivera was that we would let them increase the off-the-top parts of that tax for admin and maintenance.
Yeah.
And that went into that ballot issue, and it worked well for them because the Red Rock Canyon had terrific support, and the thing passed easily.
Okay.
Well, I totally agree that TOPS has to be honored. It was a voter-approved ordinance. An ordinance is a law, and if a few unelected officials start tampering with it without voter approval, it erodes just as erosion occurs on these beautiful foothills. It erodes the democratic process. And so I think this is a slippery slope. I think it's dangerous, actually. It gives where do you stop with that kind of thing?
We live on a slippery slope. we do. And let me ask you this.
We live on a slippery slope, and therefore we have to take whatever precautions we can.
So now human-powered, I like to call them acoustic bicycles, have electric shifting and electric suspension. Is that an electric bike?
It's not a motor.
No, it
is a motor. There's motors on the bike.
But I think, if you will, the differentiating issue here is motor-powered. And that is motor-powered for the propulsion. Okay. And when you look at a definition of and I know Ruth has looked this up in the Oxford English Dictionary and all sorts of places. When something is motorized, it is because there is a motor to provide or assist in the propulsion of that vehicle, whether it's a boat or a bicycle or anything else.
And I might add, I pay close attention. I love words, probably, especially when I put them on paper. But in any case, I looked up the word motor. And I also talked to another definitive authority, my grandson, who takes motors apart and puts them back together again. And all of my definitive sources agreed that a motor was something that emits energy and propels motion. And you can discuss all you want about the different sizes and classes, but a motor is a motor is a motor.
It's when the motor propels or assists motion in propelling the vehicle.
Let me ask you another question. One of the things that downhill bikers do is they shuttle. Somebody brought this up at the meeting yesterday. They get driven up, usually in a truck, to the top of a hill, and they ride these bikes are heavy compared to other bikes because they're only going downhill, but they're built to go downhill fast. And they do. So if it's the motor that you're really concerned about, or is it the fact that people are storing energy? And a hill is stored energy, it's gravity. So I can do a lot of damage with a downhill bike that I really would struggle to do with an electric bike, a motorized bike. So if you don't like the motor, that's one thing. But if you don't like the capability of the bicycle, saying no motors doesn't fix this equation.
I think we need to make a distinction between open space and parks. Open space often are wildlands, Colorado wildlands, that have very sensitive ecosystems and habitats. And I know that e-bikes are heavier because they have not only a motor, but they have batteries. I think they have batteries.
They do, and in general, you're correct. But
okay.
It does.
Well, at least many of them are said to be heavier.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say
let me
that.
just say
It's
many.
not safe to say that, okay?
Okay.
It would be easy. I would accept it if it was true.
Okay,
It is
okay.
generally true.
All right.
But it is not always
Let
true.
me modify what I say because I like your amplification and correction. I think that if I were grading a paper, I might put that down too. I'll go along with that. Okay? But I know that at the meeting we attended yesterday, there was a blanket statement by one of the parks people that e-bikes do no damage at all to the environment.
The funds.
And they had a list of sources, which we couldn't see because they were all in, these on this thing. But I would like to hear from botanists and biologists and scientists about this. I know for a fact, because I've spent a number of hours hiking on the Stratton open space, that there are a number of very sensitive plants that grow in bad neighborhoods along the edge of trails. This includes the anemone, which is the state flower. When I start talking about flowers, people who ride bicycles get very uncomfortable and they want to shut me up because it's only a flower. But it is a part of one of the most beautiful ecosystems in the world. I grew up in Boise, Idaho, in the foothills, where I used to sometimes ride in the foothills, even riding my bicycle down the foothills. So never did I see flora like I've seen here in Colorado. And this includes the anemone, the sand lily. Have you ever seen a sand lily? It is a beautiful, delicate flower, and it grows in bad neighborhoods along trails. So to say that bikes don't impact that, if I actually had my way, I would take all bikes off the...
That brings up a good question, because I think I was saying, I relate to the OG, the original guard that came up with this. I believe wilderness designation is what you really seek and what I would agree to, that wilderness is no mechanized transportation. So bicycles are excluded from wilderness areas. There are many in Colorado. And if you've been in a wilderness area, it is a different feel because there's no mechanized. So you have horses and you have hikers or pedestrians, whatever you want to call them, but nothing else. I believe that's, if we truly want to conserve what we have, the flowers, the rocks, it's getting rid of mechanized. It's not the electric thing. It's not the motorized thing. It's not the types of devices. It's when you have to walk or ride an animal, it's different.
And you see more of the world.
You do. So I don't believe that the people who voted for Tops, and maybe another ballot would do it, thought that they were preserving wilderness. I think they believed they were getting some parks. And I talked to a lot of people.
But there's a difference between parks and open space.
I agree with you. I agree with you. I'm just saying the way we're using them now, if you put in a trail in an open space and you allow bicycles, you have screwed the pooch, as they say. You have opened the door for mechanized things.
Yeah.
And I believe that's really where you want to go if you want to solve the problem. Stopping electric bikes may make you feel good for a moment, but it's not going to solve anything.
I don't agree with that. I think that there's an aesthetic problem involved here. I don't think mechanized bikes of any sort should, ideally, bikes shouldn't be on the Stratton open space.
So it sounds like we agree.
We agree on that, but they're already there.
That's my point.
So we have to deal with that. But
That's
we
my
don't
point.
we don't have to deal with anything more added to it.
That's where we have friction. And I think this is good.
Well, there's a limit to that, actually. Yesterday, I thought about something I said. I said that open spaces are small, intimate spaces, and they're not all small. Stratton is a small, intimate space, and really, there shouldn't be any more mechanized vehicles on it. It's a matter of enjoying, and it is a little bit of wild in an urban setting.
So, Ruth, I believe we agree here.
Yeah,
we are in violent agreement.
Well,
Let me jump in because, I think there is a lot of parallel here. And that's why I think we ought to go back maybe to the TOPS ordinance and the issue of mechanized and not get too bogged down in bicycles or no bicycles. I mean, for instance, I could see a formula like the one they have up in Boulder, which is, I think, the Front Range community that got open space best, soonest, what have you. And Boulder does not allow motorized use of any of its foothills trails, but it does allow motorized use of its flatland trails.
Now think about this. If we put a ballot item out in this community that says we want to be more like Boulder,
Well,
how do you think that's going to go?
No, I know the People's Republic of Boulder and all that. My good skiing buddy from Boulder talks about the theocratic Republic of Colorado Springs. And I also, I totally second your point on the wilderness areas. Some years ago, my daughter talked me into walking the Colorado Trail with her. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what the percentage, but a significant percentage of the Colorado Trail goes through wilderness areas, where they're La Garita, Holy Cross, what have you.
Right.
And I got to tell you, those trails are in much better shape than the ones that are open to.
I agree. So don't put me in a box that I believe only bicycles should be able to travel. Yeah. I think we've lost that whole concept of what I believe you want, which is the wilderness designation. Mm-hmm. That's really what we want. And maybe we should ask that question. For certain areas, designate them as nothing mechanized.
That might be a solution, maybe, unless state law wouldn't allow us to do that now.
I think we could do it in the same way that we already designate a very few trails in our open spaces as hiker only, and nobody's ever fought that. And now we're designating more, and I take the example of Stratton, more trails as bicycle only.
Mm-hmm. I didn't think I'd ever see that, but now I see it.
You are seeing it.
Well, it's probably a good idea to separate them where we can.
But I'd still go back to what I think is the basic point here, and that is the voter-approved TOPS ordinance, which says no motorized use. And you can do all sorts of verbal exercises and somehow say that an electric motor is not a motor. But I think I would like to see the city put it to the electorate and see what the electorate says. Because what I worry about is if the city can amend the TOPS ordinance in this way and say that per city code an e-bike is not motorized, there are all sorts of other things they can do, and they'll have the precedent. Yeah. I've actually talked to lawyers about this, and I think I get a pretty good analysis that, the city can probably get away with doing this unless they're challenged in court. And even if they were challenged in court, if you got a, very pro-government judge, they might still win. But the fact of the matter, it's what they're doing is probably technically legal until it's proven illegal in a court.
But let's quickly point out that redefining of a Class 1 e-bike, would be completely in conflict with the standard definition across the country that is in use today.
Wait. What did you just say, Dave?
That would be in conflict with the standard definition in use across the country. The description of an e-bike as a motorized vehicle is really enshrined in public policy across the country. It's well defined.
No. It's so convoluted, it's almost impossible to
You're going to
determine.
fact check me again, huh?
I will.
Okay.
So
He does that sometimes.
I tend to agree with because we've done some checking, and
you can agree, but we've changed the definition. So
Well, Colorado Springs is trying to change the definition.
no. At the federal level.
Federal level, I think it's, what I understand is it's pretty clear at the federal level.
Okay, let's go to the state level. So why can I ride my electric bike in Cheyenne Mountain State Park? Or any state park for that matter. Why can I do that?
Well, you can because they have so declared. But again, they don't have a TOPS ordinance.
Okay, so in the Colorado statute, it says that Class 1 and 2, not 3, but Class 1 and 2, I'm saying it's convoluted, are treated as bicycles, except where a community makes an exception. They decide something else. So in the state of Colorado, that's the answer. Class 1 and Class 2 are bicycles. So forget if it has a motor or not.
You know, in many respects, that would be fine. In fact, I think if you were talking about how they're used on city streets or on non-TOPS properties, I'd have no problem with that. Because I think the city does have the power to do it, just as state parks has the power to do it, what have you. But what we're seeing, and, you know, I was on the e-bike task force, which was one of the most unproductive exercises I've ever been involved in. It came to no conclusions, but it was a good educational tool. And among other things, we did research what all sorts of other entities in the state of Colorado, both municipal and statewide, were doing, and it is all over the place. And not surprisingly, up in the People's Republic of Boulder, it's very restrictive, as it is in Fort Collins. You basically have to have a disability to ride an e-bike on an urban trail.
Wow, yeah.
And so, I mean, and it's all over the place. Jefferson County is pretty much the way I think people would like us to be. To my great surprise, Summit County, up in the mountains, in the ski areas, is very restrictive. And e-bikes are only allowed essentially on their, what we would call our urban trails. You know, you can ride the e-bike down the Blue River from Breck to Frisco, and that's all good. But you can't ride them up all over the mountain trails. And
So we're talking about this today because the Colorado Springs Parks and Cultural Services Department has an e-bikes policy on the table, right? Mm-hmm. You know, we're recording on November 15th. Just yesterday, you were at a Parks Advisory Board meeting.
That's correct.
Where that was discussed. Last week, you were at a
TOPS Working Committee meeting.
Where that was also.
I wasn't actually there physically because we were snowed in, but we tracked it closely.
Okay.
And interestingly, the TOPS Working Committee took the anti-e-bike position. They basically voted not to refer the staff proposed change to the Parks Board.
Oh.
And so you've got a real split. And, you know, even in the Parks Board yesterday, it was a 4-3 vote. So there is a significant minority. And I've been sort of distressed again on the Parks Board side because one of their members is Steve Harris, who was literally one of the founding fathers of TOPS. He's on his second round on the Parks Board, but he also works for the Palmer Land Conservancy. Mm-hmm. And so the city attorney has basically said, you can't be involved in this.
Conflict of interest there.
Conflict of interest.
It's too bad.
And it is going to be a sticky issue because even if they do what they want to do and change the city code and apply that to the TOPS ordinance, most of our TOPS properties have Palmer easements on them. And most of the Palmer easements have no motorized use provisions.
So that will stand.
There are a couple of exceptions, including Stratton, incidentally, but most of them do have that. And then you're going to have to go back and renegotiate these in perpetuity conservation easements. And I think that's the last thing on earth Palmer wants to have to do.
So the Parks Advisory Board passed it 4-3.
That's correct.
So the next step would be it's going to go in front of the city council
exactly
to be approved or disapproved.
So, yeah, that's going to happen. Let me ask you this. I tend to be a realist. And
yeah, I hate that about him.
No matter which way it goes, and if it went for a vote, and the people, no matter which way they said, the reality that I have seen, and I observe this constantly all over the country, is many people will abide by the law. They'll do what they're supposed to do. And then there's an element that they either just don't know or they absolutely don't care, and they will do what they want. And then there's a group that I fit into now that says, if I'm not doing any harm to anybody and I'm not hurting anything, do I really care if I'm breaking the law? And in most situations, I don't. So if I'm on I-25 and the traffic is going 80 and I just roll along in the right lane at 80, I don't think anything of it. I don't slam on my brakes to get down to 75 like nobody on the road.
We've talked about that in a previous episode.
I will admit that if somebody's around, I will come to a complete stop at a stop sign prior to the stop line. But if nobody's around, I will gently roll through that stop sign. I know I'm a criminal.
The prosecutors now have their evidence.
but I do that. So it really comes down to, what are we trying to achieve by doing this? I get Kent's point about the slippery slope of allow this and anything can happen. I get that. I agree with you. I think that's important.
And by the way, that's my point also.
Okay, the slippery slope. So that, I think, is what we should focus on, is we don't want this slippery slope to happen. Because I believe, knowing the bicycle industry in Colorado Springs, knowing that it would not exist if it wasn't for electric bikes in the past few years, the bicycle industry would have died in this country post-COVID. People just gave up and they bought electric bikes and they thought, I like this. Otherwise, there'd be nothing. We would have no bike industry. So we have something, we do have a good point, and I would like to see that preserved about TOPS spaces. But I believe if you ask the electorate, they're going to vote that e-bikes should be allowed. And then we're going to have to deal with that.
Let's do it. It'll be no worse than where the city is headed right now in terms of doing the same thing you're talking about administratively with code changes. And secondly, it will preserve the integrity of the TOPS ordinance.
And I believe that's where Medicine Wheel is at. They support. Yeah. So this is the Medicine
Wheel Trail Advocates.
Trail Advocates. Yeah. That's where they're at. And I believe if that's key to the OG, and I believe I agree with that we should put it up for a ballot item. And honestly, I think it will be approved that people can use electric bikes. And then we're back to where we are.
Except that we did it.
But we did it officially.
Yeah, faithfully to the voters.
Yeah, and as I say, I can live with that. I may not like the result, but frankly, the result is not going to be much worse than we have right now with the complete illegal use.
Well, we're still going to have all the other things that are illegal.
Yeah, and I think that's, you're just going to have to sort of wince and take it. But I do think, and I've said many times in meetings elsewhere that I think TOPS is by far the best thing this city has done for itself in the last half century.
Yeah, man.
And therefore, I think we should do everything in our power to preserve the integrity of that ordinance.
I didn't think we'd come to an agreement. I agree with you.
And I think it's pretty likely that that's going to be the key discussion point at City Council, probably.
Oh, yeah, that's what they're going to have to. But I'm not, both because of the composition of today's council and knowing that they're under pressure from the mayor to do this, and the fact that, the results out of both the TOPS Working Committee and the Parks Board were both squishy and contradictory. It's going to be an interesting council meeting.
Do you think there will be a significant public outcry in defense of being faithful to TOPS and requiring a vote?
Yesterday's Parks Board meeting was literally standing room only. It was filled beyond.
And many people spoke. There were tons of people, even by phone.
So it's got some attention.
I think there is a very good chance if TOPS were taken back to a vote of the people that it would be approved.
Yeah, it would be nice if council would not approve this and say, yeah, it's going to have to go to a vote. And then if they said, you know what, let's take, darn it, a little more time and let's really analyze this mechanized, non-mechanized issue and see if we can't come up with something where maybe we can have another classification and take better care of it or something and be part of the amendment of TOPS.
It would be very nice, but the parks people appeared to be very dug in on their position.
Which is blanket. It's got to be the same.
Yes.
Yeah.
And also, it's what they're presenting, this Orwellian thing of declaring a motor not a motor, to get a desired result is very false and very dishonest and very incorrect, and it's not the way our city should be operating. It's an insult to the people, I think.
Took the words right out of my mouth. I'm going to side with Ruth on that. Al is practical.
We can't have these guests here and not kind of extract the pearls of wisdom that you have come up with in this community, the things that make you love the Springs, because that's what this is all about. It's loving the Springs. Obviously, you're passionate about the TOPS properties and open space. Tell us, if we could just have one morsel of your wisdom, what would that be? And not about bikes, about anything.
What do you love about the Springs?
Yeah.
I love the sense of place, the beauty, the sheer beauty, the outdoors, the environment, the hills, the mountains. I guess it has to do much with the sense of place.
It's always wise to agree with Ruth, but I do agree with Ruth on this. And it was literally the decision we made back in 1995 when we both retired from the State Department and the Foreign Service, that we could do what the vast majority of our colleagues do, is stay living in the Washington, D.C. area, because that's where headquarters was and everything. Or we could come back to the West and, during our Foreign Service career, they have something called home leave, and you come back for if you've been out long enough, for several months. And you can do basically anything you want, but you have to do it within the confines of the United States. And so we did a lot of traveling, but we also, initially we'd sometimes stay with my grandmother here in Colorado Springs. There's also a family cabin up in Teller County. And we had pretty much come to the conclusion, having seen a lot of this planet, that Colorado Springs was certainly one of the most beautiful and most spectacularly situated communities, particularly for the things that we like to do, which were outdoor activities, skiing, hiking, what have you. Not motorbiking.
Electric snowboarding, I hope.
But you told somebody.
Yeah, and we live up in Cheyenne Canyon. I walk 10 minutes and I'm in the Stratton open space.
We live in Kent's grandparents' old house.
Wow.
100+ years old.
And it's cranky and creaky and opinionated, and it has a lot of charm.
Well, and we could go on this subject, but I think we've done a pretty good job of getting the listeners up to speed on where we are in the middle of this somewhat controversial issue. I'm really glad that you are opinionated and that all of you educated me a lot. I'm glad for that. And I want to thank you, Kent and Ruth Obee, for your service to this community. And Al, you too. I mean, you three are just model citizens. You guys have gotten off the couch many times. And
even yesterday morning, that meeting went from 7:30 to afternoon.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I was glad to hear that you went. Al and I have about maybe 10 minutes of other things that we try to slip in, and you can watch and participate, or if you need to race out the door, we'll let you do that.
I'm okay.
Okay.
Great. Well, what we have coming up is a little bit of news and then a little bit of upcoming events that we like to recommend to people. So let's go through the news. Big utilities rate increases ahead. That's in the headlines. City Council approved the 2025 utilities budget, $1.8 billion. I can remember when it was under $1 billion. It's gotten big. Part of this included base rate increases for the next 5 years, Al. Next year, I think they're looking at an average $14 more a month. But in 5 years...
Yeah, and you know about how I feel about averages.
Yeah.
It's always regressive. We charge the most to the people who use the least.
But apparently, the utilities is being pretty upfront. They said, you know what? We're growing this city, and we're going to have to pay the price. I think they're also putting some blame on the requirements to burn less fossil fuels. Yeah.
Privatize the profits, socialize the cost.
I'm not sure I'm buying that it's going to be more expensive to burn less fossil fuels, maybe for the utility, but for society in general, it's going to be a lot less expensive for us to leave those fossil fuels in the ground, as you know, what I think. So just thought I'd mention that. Also, kind of a little mini controversy going on. The library district decided they were going to close the Rockrimmon branch of the library, and there was even a big citizens protest at City Hall on November 12th, trying to encourage the city to chip in and $200,000 so that the library can renew its lease.
I can add a footnote to that because there is now online I wouldn't even call it a rumor, but reports going around that Cheyenne Mountain Branch is the next one on the chopping block.
My goodness.
It is on lists, under consideration, so keep your eyes on that one. Yes, it is.
Yeah. It's wonderful, but that Cheyenne Mountain Library is a treasure. And it is heavily used. I mean, whenever I go there, I see people taking armloads of books out. It is heavily used. It's a community treasure.
As is the Rockrimmon Library.
Yeah, you used to live in that neighborhood.
But it's cost that is driving it, and we have to decide. I got to say, and you guys were at the meeting yesterday, I thought the most poignant, the most powerful person in the whole meeting, citizen input, was a woman who came in and talked about libraries and talked about her experience visiting the Parks Department, who had a library. And as a fourth grade class, she took the book and she spoke about this. This is a woman, senior citizen. I don't know how old she was, but she donated books to the Parks Department to say, I believe this will make a difference in people. And I think she's right. She stood up there and I thought, wow, of all the things that we spent brain cells on in that meeting yesterday, having a library at the Parks Department. And maybe that's the key. If we're shutting down these neighborhood libraries that are gems, there's no question about it. The people who use them love them. It's just very expensive, and it's just socialized stuff. And we are losing our appreciation of socialized things. Go to a bookstore and buy your own books. That's how a lot of residents feel. It's like, I don't want to use the library. But I grew up with a library just like the woman who donated the books, and it made a difference in my life. And I'm happy about that difference, and you probably had the same experiences.
Yeah.
So maybe if we close these libraries, fire departments, if they could, police substations, would have a small library that people can take out books about certain things. And that was the woman's point, is the Parks Department used to invite all fourth grade classes in on a field trip to visit the library and take out a book.
We know that lady.
I thought she was brilliant.
She is.
And I will pass along your words to her because she has worked for years. Her name is Donna Strom, and she is a long-time advocate for open spaces and parks.
And obviously libraries, and not traditional libraries.
Oh, not libraries. And Two of my books were among the ones she gave to the Parks Department.
Well, I hope Parks heard that, and I know they don't have the funding for it. They'll say, we can't do this. But if we're going to close libraries because they're too expensive, maybe having a librarian at the Parks Department is a step in the right direction.
Now, what I've read is that a consultant told the library district that for their long-term fiscal health, they need to own their buildings, not lease them. And so they're looking at leased branches and considering closing them. And so that this is maybe some short-term pain for the community, but maybe not necessarily a long-term problem.
I've heard the same thing, and actually put in a slightly maybe more sinister tone, that this consultant is also involved in building things.
Of course.
So the consultant who is recommending building larger libraries is a builder.
Moving right along in the news, did you guys know that over 100 pronghorns were killed during the snowstorms out east of town?
Yes.
Because they gathered where the snow had been plowed. Wow, that was sad to hear that.
Very sad. And couldn't we take better care of our pronghorn? I think they're okay, maybe we have to monetize them and just point out that they are a tourist attraction.
Apparently, they need it. Yep, there needs to be revenue associated with that. Some good things to celebrate. Ice skating in Acacia Park is now underway. Kind of a neat little feature downtown.
Starting today.
Yeah, starting November 15th. We'll put a link in the show notes to the schedule for the skating. It's generally open in the evenings on weekdays and from 10 a.m. to 9 p.m., often on weekends and during Christmas week. But there's closures like Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, so you really want to check the schedule. Also, we've talked about the city parking and curb management plan and encouraged people to take a survey back in August. Well, they've got a new survey out now they want people to take. So we'll put a link in the show notes to that. Related to that, I'll have some news in just a second about some changes that are already being made in parking downtown, which a lot of people will consider good news. 2025 Art on the Streets call for entries is now open. The deadline's February 12th, so you've got plenty of time. We'll put a link in the show notes to that call for entries. Quick report on the election. We had River Gasson in here as a guest, and we hoped that she might turn the tide for her district, but it looks like Jeff Crank defeated her fairly soundly. And it looks like Republicans swept the 3 El Paso County Commissioner races.
Lest we not forget where we are.
Yeah.
And much wiser people and more qualified than River Gasson have tried and failed, including the whole group of Republicans that ran against Doug Lamborn initially.
Yeah.
They were way more qualified than Doug, but they weren't quite as far to the right as Doug.
Yep. But it was pretty impressive to see River running because she's not even 30 years old.
Yeah.
You know, it's great to see a young person who's willing to put their career on hold and head to Washington, D.C., which is the most wonderful place on earth to live, right?
It is actually a nice place to live, despite
you
the
say so.
humidity.
I don't think it's that great in August.
It's not.
2C passed 73.5% in early results, so that's good news.
We need it.
Yeah. And a couple of the big potholes that I weave around every day that I have to drive down here, I didn't have to weave this morning. But the patches looked like they might last a couple weeks. We'll see.
Where did we finally come out on the marijuana?
It's looking like probably the ban is going down and that we're going to have recreational marijuana.
That's what I...
Yeah. And I can't believe the last stats I could find were that in Senate District 10, I think it is, the Democrat Mark Snyder slightly ahead of, I've forgotten who he was running against.
Stan Vanderwerf.
Stan Vanderwyk, yeah. Which would be a feat.
Yes, it would. Although that part of town has gotten a little more blue. And Mark was previously in the House and, you know, was mayor of Manitou.
Yeah, he had something going for him.
And he's a nice guy.
Yeah, he's a good guy. Real quickly, a couple changes downtown. I got this email from downtown Colorado Springs on November 13th. 5 areas that they're working on to have an enhanced downtown experience. One of them is these changes in parking, including parking meters shortened to 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. from Monday to Saturday and 1 to 8 p.m. on Sunday. So that's an improvement for you if you're really sensitive to having to pay at a meter. I think if you're really sensitive to that, then ride your bicycle downtown. And let's see, these are starting today, but we can expect a final parking plan apparently in January 2025. They're also
the new one starting, you say, today?
Yeah.
Oh.
There you go. So you can hang out downtown for a while before you head back.
Makes going to the symphony easier.
Yeah.
Enhanced security downtown as well that the downtown Colorado Springs is working on with the police department. Clean streets and public rights-of-way. Well, it looks like the city's neighborhood services team will be doing early morning cleanups in coordination with the downtown partnership that support business improvement district clean teams, focusing on public property in front of businesses. So we have had a little bit of an issue with the city not being as beautiful as it could be, and so they're working extra hard on that.
Pick up trash. That's what we all have to.
Yeah. A couple other things there, but those are the highlights. And then lastly, real quickly, just a few events coming up that we'd like to let you know about. Of course, you can always go to peakradar.com and find lots of events if you're looking to get out and about, and we encourage that. Get off the couch. Coming up Thursday, November 21st from 6 to 8:30 p.m. is the Rocky Mountain Field Institute annual Shindig fundraiser at Meanwhile Block. I haven't been to that joint. That's downtown, and they'll have live music, food, beverages, awards, and a silent auction. We'll put a link in the show notes. Sense and Sensibility is going to be running. The play will be running November 29th through December 22nd at the Yent Center for the Arts at UCCS, and they say that this adaptation will bring fresh energy to Jane Austen's wit, romance, and timeless drama. Might be worth a shot. We love the Independent Film Society of Colorado. They're fellow podcasters here at Studio 809.
Because you're a filmmaker, of course.
That doesn't
and I
hurt.
want to go to that.
Yeah.
Oh, and your film, Blockbusters, is absolutely superb.
Ghostbusters is a blockbuster.
It is just, I mean, your population films are winners they're out of this world. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, and you're welcome. She's referring to Growth Busters, Hooked on Growth, which features Colorado Springs quite prominently. Shoot, I'll put a link in the show notes to that. You can watch that free on YouTube.
It's a sore spot because they've edited me out of that film.
Yeah, one day we'll have to screen the 90-minute original version.
Uncut
sometime.
version.
Yeah.
I was in it.
Yeah. We'll have a special screening of the 90-minute version. So coming up from the Film Society, Sundance Shorts Tour and Sundance Indigenous Film Tour. Friday, December 6th for the shorts, December 7th for the Indigenous films at Cottonwood Center for the Arts. We'll put a link in the show notes. And if you go to the Friday screening, that's First Friday. So come early to Cottonwood Arts Center and check out all the studios there. And they've got a new exhibition opening that day of day glow art, which sounds kind of interesting.
It does.
Anything any of you want to add to our recommendations for getting out of the house coming up?
Don't think so.
The next city council meeting where they're talking about e-bikes policy. So check that out.
I'm not sure how pretty it's going to be.
All right.
Thanks for listening to Loving the Springs. Follow this podcast to keep up on
What's going on?
What's going well.
And what's going wrong.
Share it with your friends, too.
And don't forget to visit studio809podcasts.com to check out all of our fine community podcasts. You can find your new local favorite there.
We'll catch you next time.
In the Pikes Peak region, there's no shortage of activities. Whether you're experiencing breathtaking parks or magnificent works of art, if you're getting fashionable at a film festival or fresh at a farmer's market, if you want to hear the sweet sounds of a symphony or the smooth shred of a Stratocaster, look no further than Peak Radar, your one-stop shop for all events in the Pikes Peak region, your free source for viewing and posting events. So no matter how you engage with our beautiful region, visit peakradar.com and get plugged into the peak.